Humanity's Great Sage, Chapter 481. Your destiny is off the charts, fellow cultivator. Lu Yi was certain he hadn't seen the Divine Opportunity column when he visited the Quartermaster Department earlier. That was how he knew that Peng Dehai was telling the truth. The Divine Opportunity column had appeared after they solved the crisis plaguing the Myriad Beasts domain. From time to time, a Jojo cultivator would touch the Divine Opportunity column and teleport away from the hidden realm. To most Jojo cultivators, there was no point lingering in a hidden realm after most of the rewards had been divvied. Rather than wasting their time here, they would rather test their luck back at the Cloud River battlefield. The Cloud River realm was the cultivation realm where the cultivators of Jojo swiftly increased their cultivation level. Barring exceptional opportunities like this hidden realm, indulging in any distractions would only serve to delay their growth. Of course, there were exceptions such as fellow cultivator Yu. Since he dabbled in the way of beast taming, he had good reason to believe that staying in this hidden realm even after the crisis was over would be beneficial to his cultivation. Lu Yi messaged Xia Qianqian and informed her the location of the Divine Opportunity column. She quickly responded saying that they were on the way. While waiting, Lu Yi hid in a secluded corner so as to avoid the traffic. Suddenly, he felt a pair of eyes settling on his back and turned. It was then he saw an old man with a goatee smiling at him from behind a table. When their eyes met, the old man gave him a nod of acknowledgement. Lu Yi frowned immediately. How did he see me? While his concealment technique looked similar to that of a ghost cultivator's, it wasn't actually the same thing. The reason he could turn invisible was because of glyph, invisibility. On the other hand, ghost cultivators could turn invisible because of their exclusive techniques. Strictly speaking, his concealment technique was actually inferior to the ghost cultivators, albeit only slightly. He was just a dabbler in this way after all. Even so, the old man should not have been able to see through his disguise so easily. Feel free to cancel your concealment technique, fellow cultivator Yi. This place is now watched by the heavens, and only Jojo cultivators can come in. The cultivators of Myriad Beasts domain would never be able to discover this place, much less come in, the old man said suddenly. This was the first time Lu Yi heard about such a thing. What surprised him even more was the fact that the old man came from Jojo. He had met the old man the first time he came to the Quartermaster Department with the three women. At the time, he thought that he was a Myriad Beasts domain cultivator. Clearly he was mistaken. There was one more thing that concerned him, and that was the fact the old man had addressed him by his surname. Lu Yi did not know him, but he clearly knew Lu Yi. He considered his options for a bit before removing invisibility. While keeping a hand on his saber, he sauntered up to the old man and asked, "You know who I am?" The old man stroked his beard smilingly. "It would be hard not to when even the alley walls are covered in your portrait, fellow cultivator Yi. How did you see through my concealment?" Out of all the surprises the old man had dished out, this was the one that concerned Lu Yi the most. He had always thought that his concealment technique was pretty good, but if it was just a delusion of his, then he would have to reconsider his measures in this area altogether. The old man said enigmatically, "That's not all I can see, fellow cultivator Yi. I can see something else as well." "What do you mean?" The old man looked up as if there was something above Lu Ye's head before saying seriously, "I have met countless people in my life, fellow cultivator Yi. And I can tell you with certainty that I have only met one man whose destiny matches yours." Lu Yi narrowed his eyes slightly. "You're versed in Destiny Glimpse, sir?" Destiny Glimpse was a rare secret technique in Jojo. In fact, it was so rare that most people thought that it only existed in legends. For obvious reasons, Lu Yi never thought that he would encounter someone with the legendary technique in this hidden realm. He did not think that the old man was lying to him either. It was a fact that his luck had been incredible since he entered the Cloud River battlefield. Even if he assumed that the old man wasn't telling the whole truth, it was clear that he could see something. "Oh yes. On that note, I have a warning to impart. Your luck is exceptional, but I also see a purple energy mixed within it. I would urge you to be careful. Also, you have been too lucky as of late. Be warned that you may encounter some troubles and lose something in the near future." "And what am I going to lose exactly?" "That depends on what you have, fellow cultivator." Lu Yi stared at the old man for a moment. He was sure he would be more convinced if the old man would just drop his ambiguous way of speaking and almost pretentious demeanor. You said you saw a man whose destiny matches mine. Can you tell me who he is? The old man's expression turned meaningful. His surname is Feng, and he hails from the Crimson Blood sect of Bingzhou. Do you know him, fellow cultivator? At this point, Lu Yi strongly suspected that the old man knew exactly who he was. There was no way he would bring up his first senior brother otherwise. That said, Lu Yi was more concerned with the fact that the old man had met his first senior brother before. Loosen your shoulders, fellow cultivator Yi. I'm just making small talk with you. The old man stroked his beard again. My post requires me to stay here for an extended period of time, you see. This is one of the few ways I have to stave off boredom. And don't worry, I am a neutral party. The obvious dawned upon him. You're a member of the Divine Trade Association? Exactly. He had been wondering why a Zhou cultivator would be allowed to guard the quartermaster department. Now it all made sense. The Divine Trade Association was a very special organization that shared a business relationship with both the Grand Sky Coalition and the Thousand Demon Ridge. It was also a perfectly neutral party, which was why its members were allowed to supervise the quartermaster department. It would be unfair to either faction otherwise. Lu Ye's hostility diminished slightly after learning that the old man was a member of the Divine Trade Association. He took a moment to organize his thoughts before asking, You said that the heavens are watching over this place. What do you mean by that, exactly? The old man explained patiently, There are many hidden realms with a quartermaster department, like this one. It is a place where Zhou cultivators can exchange their battle points for resources. For obvious reasons, it would not be a good idea for the natives to discover this anomaly, so a kind of sensory barrier is enacted around it. A native will never notice the quartermaster department even though it's right in front of them. It's as if this place doesn't exist at all. On a related note, the reason I can see through your disguise isn't because I'm particularly exceptional in this type of art, but because the heavens have bestowed upon me a special authority, so to speak. It is so that I can perform my guard duties properly. Does that include your destiny glimpse? Oh no. That one is all me. Lu Yi nodded in acknowledgement and fell silent again. A few seconds later he said, Someone told me that everything we've experienced in this world is something that has happened in the past. Is it true? What if it is? What if it isn't? I just want to know the truth. To satisfy my curiosity, so to speak. The old man looked out of the hall for a long time before answering. Do you know how many times this hidden realm has appeared in the Cloud River battlefield, fellow cultivator? What do you mean? The Myriad Beast domain has opened 7 times to the cultivators of the Cloud River battlefield before this, but no one has ever succeeded in solving the root of the problem until now. I can tell you now that all 7 instances have ended with the destruction of Bylandia and the extinction of humanity. That is why I offer you and your companions my thanks, fellow cultivator Yi. You have saved me from having to witness hell in this cultivation world an 8th time. The old man smiled when he noticed Lu Ye's stunned look. It is exactly what you think, fellow cultivator. The Myriad Beast domain is reset every time it is destroyed, and it is opened on the Cloud River battlefield once more. Is it the doing of the heavens? The heavens are omnipotent. But take the spirit beasts we killed and the mutant cores we extracted from their bodies, for example. How do you explain them if it is all fake? The mutant cores he extracted were still lying in his storage space. No matter how powerful the heavens were, they couldn't possibly revive the dead, could they? What you see is not necessarily real. But of course what you get is definitely real. Why would the heavens do this? Is it really just to hone the cultivators of Zhou? Who could say? I would not dare to fathom the heavens' will. There was nothing Lu Yi could say to that. Since we've eliminated the root of the problem, will this hidden realm reset and appear at the Cloud River battlefield as if nothing had changed? That is unlikely. In my opinion, the Myriad Beasts domain will continue along this timeline forevermore. It will become an attraction to countless beast tamers as well. The Myriad Beasts domain had reached heights Zhou had not seen in the way of beast taming. Once the word was spread, it was only natural that beast tamers like fellow cultivator, you would seek out the hidden realm in hopes of refining their way of beast taming. Of course, it is equally possible that this hidden realm will disappear forever, the old man added. Suddenly, he looked out of the hall and said, "Your friends have arrived, fellow cultivator." Lu Yi followed his gaze and saw nothing at first. However, it wasn't long before his companions appeared out of thin air. It would seem that everyone except Lu Yi knew that it was safe to reveal themselves in this safe zone. Zhou Hai walked up to the old man and tossed his identity pass on the table. "I would like to exchange all my battle points for amulets, thank you." The old man nodded smilingly before doing as he said. It wasn't long before everyone did the same thing. Lu Yi also exchanged his battle points for amulets, even though Peng Dehai had told him that battle points could be saved for future use. Right now, his first priority was improving his cultivation. Everything else was secondary until he was strong enough to consider them. As exceptional as he was a bottom feeder for as long as he remained in the second order. He currently had almost 30,000 battle points. He decided to exchange them all for 1 gold amulet, 2 purple amulets, 1 blue amulet, 1 green amulet, and 2 white amulets. He was left with only 56 battle points when the transaction was complete. He could have exchanged the remaining battle points for some spirit pills and spirit stones, but of course he refrained from doing so. It wasn't easy to earn battle points. As far as he knew, they could only be earned in some hidden realms. With that in mind, how could he possibly waste them on spirit pills and spirit stones? To Cloud River Realm cultivators, battle points should always be spent on amulets. Usually, the only way to get an amulet was to win them in auctions or happen upon them by accident. Both things required a tremendous amount of luck. On the other hand, they could purchase amulets anytime and anywhere as long as they had enough battle points. It was clear from the looks on everyone's faces that this was a rewarding journey. Now it was truly time to leave this hidden realm. Zhou Hai was the first to walk up to the Divine Opportunity column and press his hand on the pillar. A second later he was gone just like that. Peng Dehai and Xia Qianqian were right behind him. The 7th order body tempering cultivator was the fourth to leave, while Kitty Shun and Lu Yi last. It wasn't because they were acting modest, but because they would randomly appear within 50 kilometers from the entrance to the hidden realm. Naturally, it was wiser to allow their stronger companions to leave first. When he was ready, Lu Yi walked up to the Divine Opportunity column and willed himself to exit the hidden realm. The next moment he found himself standing in the middle of the wilderness. Humanity's Great Sage. Chapter 482, Wisp of Sanctification. Lu Yi immediately checked his surroundings. He relaxed when he confirmed that there was no danger. His battlefield imprint notified him of a new message. When he checked it, he realized that it was Xia Qianqian reminding him to meet up with her at the nearest Divine Trade Association. Earlier, Lu Yi and the 3 women had agreed to sell the Beast Pact art to the Vault of Providence after exiting the hidden realm. As the secret technique was something that could uplift a faction to a whole new level, they were expecting the heavens to reward them handsomely for it. Specifically, they were hoping to garner the heavens' attention. The contribution points they would get for selling the secret technique was secondary at best. Lu Yi took out his 10-point map and inspected it for a moment. Once he had identified his position, he brought out his flying spirit artifact and soared into the sky. 2 hours later, Lu Yi landed in front of a Divine Trade Association hotspot. 3 people were already waiting for him. They were Kitty Shun, Xia Qianqian, and to his surprise Lan Zi. Lu Yi had no idea how the woman made it out of the insectoid nest or infiltrated by Landia, but the fact she was here meant she must have left the myriad beasts' domain earlier than the rest of them. Kitty Shun gave him a wave, and Xia Qianqian greeted him cordially. Lan Zi's expression revealed nothing as he met her eyes for a second. "I thought you weren't going to show up for a second there." Xia Qianqian joked before patting him on the shoulder and pretending to his senior, "You're not a bad person, boy. If you ever need help on the Cloud River battlefield, do not hesitate to call upon my aid." Lu Yi rolled his eyes at her. "You're about to ascend to the real lake realm, aren't you?" Xia Qianqian's offer sounded generous, but it only applied while she was still in the Cloud River battlefield. Considering what they had gotten from the hidden realm, he did not doubt that she could ascend to the real lake realm very soon. In other words, her offer was time-limited at best or not applicable at worst. "Nah, I'm not leaving the Cloud River battlefield that quickly. Anyway," Xia Qianqian chuckled before changing the subject. Since everyone is present, it is time to sell the secret technique to the Vault of Providence as per our promise. Before that though, we should make a sacred pact to prove that the four of us are the first sellers of the secret technique. Ye six, you're the reason we got this secret technique in the first place, so you can have 70% of the contribution points. The rest of us will take 10% each. Are we in agreement? Kitty Shun and Lan Zi were perfectly fine with the arrangement. Lu Yi nodded in acknowledgement as well. He wasn't a promise breaker, and they had shared a pleasant cooperative relationship in the hidden realm. The least he could do after they served him as his attendants was to repay the favor. I'll summon the sacred pact then, Xia Qianqian offered before straightening her expression and mumbling under her breath. Very soon, a beam of golden light descended from the sky, and she fished out a sacred pact from within. She then passed it to the others so that they might inspect it. Everyone planted their handprint on the sacred pact after confirming its contents. When all was said and done, Lu Yi said, "All right, I'm going to sell the secret technique now." He then walked into the Divine Trade Association and stopped in front of the Divine Opportunity column. Every Divine Trade Association hotspot possessed a Divine Opportunity column of their own. Cultivators did not need to pay any additional fee to use it. However, this also meant that the sanctum was constantly packed with people. Lu Yi had to wait for a bit before it was finally his turn to use the Divine Opportunity column. Lu Yi put his hand on the pillar and connected his mind with the Vault of Providence. An instant later, he found himself standing in the Vault of Providence. As usual, the place was cluttered with all kinds of goods. He proceeded to bring out the jade slip the Great Elder had given him and attempted to sell it. As expected, the Vault of Providence offered him a whopping 50,000 contribution points if he chose to sell it directly to the Vault of Providence. Since it was agreed that he would receive 70% of the profit, that was 35,000 contribution points. He knew why he was offered such a huge sum for the secret technique. The beast taming faction would never be the same again once the technique was popularized. Without hesitation, he accepted the transaction and felt the jade slip disappearing from his hand. At the same time, his battlefield imprint suddenly heated up a little. He took a moment to inspect it. Name: Lu Yi. Identity: Disciple of Crimson Blood Sect. Cultivation: Second Order. Cloud River Realm. Location: Cloud River. Battlefield contribution points: 92,250 battle points. 56. He had a little over 57,000 contribution points before this. The numbers matched. He also noticed that a new row, battle points, had been added beneath contribution points. It showed exactly how many battle points he had left after exchanging them for amulets. 92,000 contribution points was a huge sum. He doubted that there were many Cloud River Realm cultivators out there who could match his wealth. After all, few people would hoard contribution points unless they were aiming to buy something expensive. Generally speaking, it was better to spend them on things that could grow one's strength as quickly as possible. Now that the secret technique was properly registered in the Vault of Providence, anyone could buy it by paying a certain amount contribution points. Lu Yi was curious to know how much the Beast Pact art would be sold for in the store. When he checked, he saw that its price tag was over 8,000 contribution points. That was more expensive than even the best heaven-grade cultivation technique out there. At first glance, it would seem like the secret technique was sold at a lower value than it was worth. Lu Yi and the girls were paid a whopping 50,000 contribution points for it after all. However, the copy in the Vault of Providence could be sold repeatedly, and there were a lot of beast tamers in Zhou. Beast taming might be a small faction compared to the 6 factions, but it was a big faction compared to other minor factions. Therefore, the amount of people who would be interested in the secret technique could only be innumerable. The Vault of Providence only needed to sell 7 copies to recoup what it had paid to Lu Yi. When it came to doing business, the Vault of Providence possessed a unique advantage that no one could match. For example, Lu Yi would never consider selling the secret technique to another cultivator, because he wouldn't receive contribution points for it. Moreover, the sale would not earn him the attention of the heavens. No matter how he looked at it, selling the secret technique to the Vault of Providence was the best choice. It was true that Lu Yi was very lucky already, but who would begrudge their luck becoming even better? After that, Lu Yi left the Vault of Providence and returned to the entrance. Xia Qianqian and Kitty Shun were still waiting for him, but Lan Zi was nowhere to be seen. The woman had already escaped, of course. The only reason she came here was to receive the heaven's boon and the contribution points. Since she had received both, why would she stay and give Lu Yi the chance to kill her? Especially since she most likely wasn't a match for him? Xiao Qianqian said, "All right then. It's really time for me to take my leave. Send me a message if you need me for anything." She bade them goodbye and vanished into the horizon. After Xiao Qianqian was gone, Kitishin asked, "Are you ready to head back to the arcane glade, Yi 6? "Not yet. I need to buy some things. You can go back first if you want." "It's okay. I can wait. It's not like a couple hours delay is going to make a difference." Lu Yi nodded and went back into the Divine Trade Association. He was planning to buy some raw materials to forge his ward flags. In the Hidden Realm, he had used up everything he had except the ward flag set he had received from the 100 Wards Tower. His abilities as a ward cultivator would be affected if he did not have a sufficient amount of ward flags and ward keystones. When he was still a Spirit Creek Realm cultivator, Lu Yi was forced to purchase his ward flags directly from the Vault of Providence because he was too weak to forge them via telekinesis. Plus, he never really had the time or place to forge his ward flags since he was constantly being hunted by the Thousand Demon Ridge. It was a different story now that he was a Cloud River Realm cultivator. At the Second Order, he was almost strong enough to forge ward flags via telekinesis without using any tools. Naturally, he wasn't going to waste his contribution points on pre-made ward flags any longer. Lu Yi exited the Divine Trade Association a second time a little over half an hour later. He had spent almost all of his spirit stones on raw materials. Kitishin was still waiting for him outside. "Let's go," Lu Yi beckoned before flying into the sky. Kitishin followed closely behind him. On the way back to their arcane glade, Kitishin suddenly recalled something and asked, "I totally forgot, where is sister?" She had not seen Yi since they entered the Hidden Realm. She hadn't thought much about it at the time, but it didn't make sense for the young girl to still be missing after they exited the Hidden Realm. "Oh, she didn't follow us into the Hidden Realm. I asked her to watch over the arcane glade for us," Lu Yi lied. "I see," Kitishin replied without suspecting anything. A little over half a day later, Lu Yi and Kitishin arrived at their arcane glade once more. However, they were greeted by a shocking sight. The arcane glade was in full view from the sky. Lu Yi had established a concealment ward before they left the arcane glade. Generally speaking, no one should be able to spot arcane glade unless they were looking closely. However, the arcane glade was completely exposed right now. It could only mean that someone had destroyed his wards. The duo hurriedly descended on the ground. A while later, Lu Yi stood in front of a dry spirit sprout with a deep frown on his face. Kitishin walked up to him and said worriedly, "I can't find sister anywhere, Yi 6. Lu Yi had told her that Yi was watching the arcane glade. But not only was she nowhere to be seen, the arcane glade was in tatters as well. Clearly, something bad must have happened to Yi. It was only natural she was worried for her. Although Yi did not like her, she wasn't so petty-minded that she would be delighted by her suffering. She was Lu Ye's younger sister, which meant she was a companion she had to look out for. It was as simple as that. Meanwhile, Lu Yi was still staring at the dry spring with a puzzled expression on his face. The spirit sprout had been dry when he decided to take refuge on this hill. Although there were some rundown buildings around it, it was clear that it was an abandoned arcane glade. The reason he decided to stay in the end was because the spirit sprout had chosen the same night to come back to life. However, the spirit spout had dried up a second time after they returned from the myriad beasts' domain. If it had dried up naturally, then he had nothing to say. But it was clear from the surrounding traces that this was not a natural occurrence. "I didn't know that spirit sprouts could be destroyed," Lu Yi said while turning to Kitishin. From his perspective, some bastard had destroyed both his wards and his spirit sprout, effectively guaranteeing a lose-lose scenario for everyone. However, Kitishin denied his statement. "No, that's not it. Someone has stolen the wisp of sanctification." "What is a wisp of sanctification?" "Every arcane glade has a spirit sprout, and every spirit sprout has a wisp of sanctification. It is the source of a spirit sprout, and without it a spirit sprout is nothing more but a dead spring. In that sense, the wisp of sanctification is the true heart of an arcane glade," Kitishin explained patiently. It was quite simple to ferry a wisp of sanctification. The cultivator simply needed to offer the heavens a certain amount of contribution points to manifest the spirit sprout. They could then store it in a special container and take it away. Luyi was surprised to hear this. He had bought quite a lot of intel from the Divine Trade Association, but none of it had mentioned the wisp of sanctification at all. It would seem that there were still many things about the Cloud River battlefield that he didn't know about. Humanity's Great Sage, Chapter 483, When Joy Comes in Threes. Previously, Luyi thought that the worst that could happen while they were gone was a different group moving in and taking over the arcane glade. In that case, they would have to fight the invaders and find a way to reclaim it. The arcane glade was just a tertius-level arcane glade, so it shouldn't be coveted by high-level cultivators who were far beyond their ability to fight against right now. Together with Kitty-shun, he was pretty sure they stood a good chance at reclaiming the arcane glade. Unfortunately, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. The invaders hadn't occupied the arcane glade, but they stole the very source that turned it into one in the first place. This was a worse outcome than even the worst-case scenario he had envisioned. Why would they take the wisp of sanctification? To sell it or use it for themselves, of course. Kitty-shun replied. Suppose we stole someone else's wisp of sanctification and installed it in this spring. The spirit sprout would come back to life. If it was merged with an existing wisp of sanctification, then the quality of the arcane glade would go up by a certain degree. In fact, most Primus-level arcane glades are created that way. There are actually very few natural-born Primus-level arcane glades in the Cloud River battlefield. You can do that? Sure you can. There are a lot of arcane glade owners who do this. It's not necessarily a good thing to own an arcane glade then. Without sufficient cultivation and numbers, it's basically a giant cake everyone wants a piece of. That is correct. That's why it's common practice to gather a group as soon as possible when an ownerless spirit sprout is discovered. Otherwise, it's unlikely one could hold on to it for long. Kitty-shun hesitated for a second before adding, "Sister E is missing?" Luyi assured her E is fine. She messaged me a while ago. Luyi turned back toward the dried spring with a grimace. Who would have thought that he would lose his arcane glade like this? Not only that, most of the ward flags and the ward keystones of the Grand Defensive Ward he left behind had been destroyed. Sure, he had a couple spares in his storage space, but each set was worth over 10,000 contribution points. Not even he could take such a loss without batting an eye. Now that he thought about it, the reason his arcane glade was discovered was probably due to its proximity to the entrance to the hidden realm. The number of cultivators in the area must have increased dramatically when news of the hidden realm's appearance spread. It wasn't like everyone managed to enter the Myriad Beast's domain either. In any case, one of these people must have noticed the arcane glade and decided to take it into their own hands, literally. There was no need to search for the culprits either. Even if, against all odds, they managed to find the needle in the haystack, they might not be strong enough to take revenge. The opening of the hidden realm had attracted plenty of 8th and 9th order cultivators, and Luyi had a hunch that the thief or thieves who stole their arcane glade belonged in that group. The reason he thought this was because his wards had been breached by force. If the thieves had a ward cultivator with them, they would have dismantled his wards the proper way so as not to waste the ward flags and ward keystones. This meant that the thieves lacked the insight or skill of a ward cultivator, but were able to see through his concealment ward and brute force their way through his grand defensive ward anyway. The only ones who fit the profile were high-level cultivators. This incident also reminded Luyi of the old man watching over the quartermaster department of the Myriad Beast's domain. He had said that he was too lucky as of late, and that he might encounter some troubles or lose some possessions because of it. He did not expect that prediction to come true so soon. He hadn't really believed the old man because of his ambiguous manner of speaking. It would seem that he had underestimated him. The old man also warned him to be careful of the purple energy mixed within his destiny, though he couldn't even begin to fathom what the purple energy might represent. In any case, there was no point dwelling on the subject. Luyi walked into his house after setting up some simple alarm wards and protective wards. As usual, most of his problems could be solved simply by increasing his cultivation. He currently had 1 gold amulet, 2 purple amulets, 1 blue amulet, 1 green amulet, and 2 white amulets. It should be enough to boost him all the way to the third order. First, he constructed one massive gathering spirits. Then, he constructed many tiny ones all around his body. Amber was already sitting beside him and watching him with bright eyes. Yi was also sitting cross-legged on the floor and waiting for Lu Yi to begin. Once everything was ready, Lu Yi took out the gold amulet and crushed it. Just like before, the crushed powder of the amulet slowly transformed into a vortex, though in this case it was gold-colored because the amulet was gold. At the same time, a massive stream of pure spirit mist poured out of the vortex and cycled around Lu Yi. The spirit mist did not spread further once it grew to a certain level. Every time Lu Yi breathed, the spirit mist would be converted into spiritual power. The tiny funnels in his spiritual points were greedily devouring the spirit mist as well. The spirit mist was so pure that it was transformed into his spiritual power instantly. No refinement was necessary whatsoever. This was the reason amulets were so effective at increasing a cultivator's cultivation level. It was many times more efficient than inhaling world spiritual qi. Amber and Yi were sitting on Lu Ye's left and right side. They too were enjoying growing stronger at an accelerated rate. Amber and Yi were inhaling the spirit mist seriously, but Lu Yi did not need to do such a thing to consume the spirit mist around him. At some point he grew so bored that he decided to study his blade technique insights. After ascending to the second order and fighting many deadly battles in the myriad beasts domain, his understanding of his personal blade skills had deepened considerably. This was especially true after battling against the sect master of the Black Tortoise sect, Niu Meng. The harrowing experience had enlightened him on many things, and he had high expectations that he might achieve a breakthrough in the near future. Time passed bit by bit. It wasn't until a full day and night had passed that the golden vortex finally vanished completely. They still had many amulets to go through, however. Without pause, Lu Yi immediately pulled out the purple amulet and crushed it. Very soon, a purple vortex appeared where the golden vortex was a while ago, and spirit mist began pouring out of it once more. Lu Yi had briefly experimented with the amulets, and he could confirm that the quality of the spirit mist was the same no matter what type of amulet you used. The only difference was the duration. In terms of value, a gold amulet was the best, and a white amulet was the worst as a matter of course. After all, one gold amulet was equal to 81 white amulets. For hours later, the purple amulet had yet to run out, but Lu Yi sensed something that made him put down his book and look into his own body. His river of spiritual power was flowing violently, a sign that it had reached a bottleneck. However, refined spiritual power was still pouring into his body at an incredible rate, causing him to feel bloated. The feeling continued to worsen until suddenly, the river churned and grew an entire size. The bloated feeling disappeared, and his river of spiritual power returned to calm once more. Just like that, he was a third-order Cloud River Realm cultivator. Lu Yi blanked out a little. He had had a feeling that he would reach the third order very soon, but he still couldn't help but feel happy about it. The Cloud River Realm truly was a miraculous realm. He had ascended to the second order in just half a month. Today, he ascended to the third order just 20 or so days later. He had never cultivated this quickly back when he was at the Spirit Creek realm. Each climb to the next minor realm took months of hard work, and each spiritual point could only be unlocked one by one. Of course, the reason he was able to ascend this quickly was because he had used a lot of amulets. When he was still in the first order, he had spent a massive amount of contribution points bidding for amulets in an amulet auction. Even before that, he had already used up a green amulet and a purple amulet. This time, he had earned nearly 30,000 battle points from the Myriad Beasts domain. He spent them all on amulets. Most Cloud River Realm cultivators weren't nearly as wealthy or lucky as Lu Yi. Take the cultivators who entered the Myriad Beasts domain for example. Barring those who participated in the crucial operation in the Black Tortoise sect, even those who survived until the end of the siege had earned a couple thousand battle points at most. That was only enough to purchase one purple amulet, which wasn't much for anyone above the fifth order. In fact, Lu Yi could see that it took far more spirit mist to grow from the second order to the third order than it was from the first order to the second order. The amount of resources he needed to consume would only increase over time. Lu Yi still had amulets, so he didn't stop cultivating. He wasn't going to make it to the fourth order, of course, but it would still cut down the amount of time he spent on the third order considerably. Suddenly, Amber broke him out of his reverie by letting out a roar and shining like a golden sun. Not only that, it had uncontrollably manifested its true body. Lu Yi watched it carefully. He could sense Amber's energy gathering at a certain point in its body. Thanks to the bonding pact, the life energy art, and the beast imprint art, Lu Yi figured out the issue immediately. It was the opposite of bad news. The white tiger was about to undergo an ascension. Hurriedly explained Lu Yi, Amber is about to create its own mutant core. For the longest time, Amber had been stuck on the level of a normal spirit beast. The only reason it could even enter the Cloud River battlefield was because it shared a bonding pact with Lu Yi. Wherever Lu Yi could go, Amber could follow. Amber had not been slacking off. Every day, it consumed a massive amount of spirit pills and the occasional mutant cores to grow its strength. Just now, it had been inhaling the spirit mist to the best of his abilities as well. Finally, it was time for it to become a champion-class spirit beast. What's wrong with you? Lu Yi suddenly asked in alarm. It was because Yi was flickering erratically. He had only seen this happening when she was grievously hurt. Not only that, she was drooping as if she was having a hard time trying to stay awake. Yi forced herself to stay awake as she explained, I am Amber's ghost spirit. Its ascension affects me as well, meaning that I'm probably going to ascend with it. I can't stay awake any longer. Please take care of yourself while we're... She suddenly flew into Amber's body. The white tiger itself hit the floor with a loud thud. Lu Yi rushed over immediately to check if they were okay. To his relief, the tiger was just asleep. He did not know that Amber's ascension could only be completed when it was asleep. The white tiger was one of a kind, so he did not know if this phenomenon was normal or not. The one thing he could be certain of was that Amber's energy was still concentrating at a certain point in its body. When a spirit beast ascended to a champion-class spirit beast, it would create a mutant core in its own body. Clearly, that was what was happening right now. Curiously, the spirit mist was still pouring into Amber's body when it was asleep. In fact, it was moving faster than before, probably because it was creating its mutant core. This was undoubtedly good news, of course. It would seem that today was the day joy came in threes. Humanity's Great Sage, Chapter 484 Snowfall. If Lu Yi were to be perfectly honest, Amber wasn't very helpful despite its best efforts and intentions. It was a different story if it became a champion-class spirit beast, however. At the very least, it would be able to stand on its own feet in the Cloud River battlefield, not to mention that they had formed the Life Energy art and Beast Pact art as well. The stronger Amber was, the greater the benefits Lu Yi could reap from his tamed beast. As for Yi, she was Amber's ghost spirit. Their lives were literally tied to one another. If Amber became a champion-class spirit beast, she should naturally reach the level of a Cloud River realm cultivator as well. Everyone's growth had skyrocketed after their adventure in the Myriad Beasts domain. For hours later, after the first purple amulet had run its course, he took out his second purple amulet and crushed it. Time passed peacefully amidst dull cultivation. On the third day, Lu Yi heard a series of knocks on his door and set down his book. He opened the door and came face to face with Kitty Shen. What is it? Kitty Shen looked over his shoulder and noticed the slumbering Amber. However, she didn't think too much about it and said, the wisp of sanctification was stolen, and our arcane glade was destroyed. What are your future plans? Lu Yi shook his head to indicate he hadn't thought that far away. If this was the Spirit Creek battlefield, he might have considered returning to his outpost and lending them his aid. Cultivating there would be slow, but it was better than nothing. In the Cloud River battlefield, a cultivator without an arcane glade was no different from a homeless person. They could only roam the world and seek out opportunities to the best of their abilities. In that case, would you like to come with me? Kitty Shen asked expectantly. Where are you going? A friend of mine just messaged me saying that she had stumbled upon a newly born arcane glade. She needs to gather a group of trustworthy companions as soon as possible. I'm going to meet up with her, and you're more than welcome to join me. You're a ward cultivator. I'm sure she won't turn you away. Ward cultivators were easily the most popular breed of cultivators in the Cloud River battlefield, because their skills were critical in improving the defense of an arcane glade. Lu Ye's cultivation level might be a bit weak, but he was skilled enough in the way of wards that any group with an arcane glade that was tertius level or below should accept him. Kitty Shen had thought of Lu Yi immediately after she received that message. She had also asked her friend about this and obtained their permission. That was why she had come to offer him an invitation. However, Lu Yi shook his head after thinking for a moment. "Thank you, but I don't think I'll be joining you. I need to find that sect mate of mine." He didn't know what the hell was going on with Wuxia, but the body-tempering cultivator still hadn't shown up at the arcane glade even though it had been almost 2 months since he messaged him about it. Yesterday, when Lu Yi was checking in with Wuxia, he discovered in horror that the body-tempering cultivator was still half a month away from the arcane glade. And that was assuming he was traveling at the normal pace of a Cloud River Realm cultivator too. At Wuxia's pace it might be months, maybe half a year before he finally showed up. Moreover, Amber was in the middle of ascending right now. He could neither leave it behind nor take it with him. He could use the spirit beast bag, but there was a chance it might disrupt its ascension. Just wasn't worth the risk. "Is that so?" Kitty Shen's eyes turned disappointed. "Are you sure?" Lu Yi shook his head firmly. The young woman broke into a wry smile and said, "I guess this is goodbye then. I hope we will still be friends when we meet again in the future." Even now, they still didn't know the other person's name or faction. This rarely happened in the Spirit Creek battlefield, but was an all-too-common sight in the Cloud River battlefield. In fact, companions who seemed as close as siblings could turn on each other in the blink of an eye. Take Lan Zi and him for example. They had afforded each other their full cooperation during their adventure in the Myriad Beasts domain, but he did not doubt for a second that she would kill him if given the opportunity. It was the same for him. "Take care. You too." Kitty Shen gave Lu Yi one last sunny smile before walking away and leaping into the air. It wasn't long before she vanished into the horizon. They were strangers who had run into each other by chance and hung out with each other out of convenience as sake. Naturally, they weren't going to stay with each other until the end. It had always been a matter of time before they separated once the thing that tied them together was gone. Neither person felt too sad about the parting, since not enough time had passed for their relationship to deepen into something meaningful. Kitty Shen had left with no regrets, and Lu Yi didn't feel sorry about her departure. This would not be the first or the last parting he experienced in his cultivation journey. Suddenly, Lu Yi looked up into the sky and raised his hand. Something small, white and cold landed on his palm before melting into cool water. It was snowing. Maybe it was because he was a third-order cultivator now, but it was only now that he noticed the drop in temperature. He could not help but recall his time as a mining slave in the Evil Moon Valley. At the time, winter was easily his most feared season bar none. Countless mining slaves had died from the cold because they were neither fed enough food nor given enough clothes to keep warm. He himself had barely stayed alive by stealing the clothes of the frozen corpses around him. Today, he no longer suffered from the weather as he had before. It was one of the benefits of being at a higher cultivation. He walked back into his room and resumed his reading. He had already used up all of his amulets, so the only way to continue his cultivation was to consume spirit pills. In this regard, Lu Yi was far more advantaged than any other cultivator. For as long as the tree of glyphs were fueled, he could consume a gazillion spirit pills and never suffer the sequelae, assuming he could refine them in time, of course. This was the true reason he didn't really need an arcane glade. The snow was pretty heavy. After he got bored with reading and cultivating, he left the house and began honing his blade technique. His moves hadn't changed, but somehow it felt different to perform the dance under the heavy snow. As of late, Lu Yi had a feeling that his blade skills had reached a bottleneck. He was close to making a breakthrough, but unlike his cultivation, he couldn't just pour spiritual power into his body until it automatically entered the next level. Moreover, he could feel each cultivation breakthrough clearly. During the Spirit Creek realm, it was unlocking the next spiritual point. During the Cloud River realm, it was the sudden expansion of his river of spiritual power. It was impossible not to notice when he entered the next minor realm. Making a breakthrough in his blade skills was different, however. There were no clear milestones that informed him how close he was to the next level. Consuming spirit pills or inhaling world spiritual chi wouldn't help him either. He had considered using the mystic fruit to hasten his progress, but Amber was still asleep right now. Right now, it would be folly to enter the rift of illusions at best. Both him and Amber would be completely defenseless if an enemy chose that exact moment to attack them. This hill was pretty secluded, but everyone in the Cloud River battlefield could fly. Theoretically, there was no place in this world that a Cloud River realm cultivator could not reach. In fact, many cultivators had passed through the hill during this time, even though none of them noticed his presence because of the concealment ward he set up. As long as he didn't cause waves on purpose, and as long as the other cultivators weren't looking too closely, it was unlikely that he would be discovered. Amber remained asleep for 7 days straight, and the snow had continued for just as long. The snow outside his wards was at least a meter deep. Luyi was practicing his blade technique when suddenly, he heard a strange noise coming from inside his house. He immediately looked over just in time to see flying out into the open. Luyi's eyes lit up as he put away his saber and walked up to her. The young girl slammed into his chest so hard that he was knocked to the ground. He clutched his waist with a death grip, burying her face into his chest like she was trying to sink into him. Her fragrant hair tickled his nose because of the aggressive action. Luyi rubbed Yi's head gently while voicing his puzzlement. What's wrong? They had met each other when they were both weaklings. Together they had gone through thick and thin for 3 years. She viewed him as her family and he her, but this was the first time he saw her reacting this violently. Even now, he could feel her petite figure trembling slightly with fear and shock. Luyi, I dreamed for a very, very long time. It was such a long, deep dream that I thought I would never awaken from it, she said with a sob. Amber had fallen asleep while undergoing its ascension, and its ghost spirit was affected as well. Only 7 days had passed from Luyi's perspective, but from Yi's it might as well be 7 years. Moreover, the feeling had reminded her about her past. At the beginning she felt like she was stuck in this black, unwakeable dream until one day, she abruptly awakened to reality. Since then she became Amber's ghost spirit. That was why there was nothing she feared more than being stuck in an unwakeable dream. I'm scared. Yi started crying loudly. Luyi continued to caress her head gently and tried to console her. The dream is over. There's no need to be afraid any longer. Unfortunately, it only made her sobs louder. It was at this moment that a tiger's head entered the corner of his eyes. It was Amber exiting the house. Judging from its energetic appearance, it was clear that it had completed its ascension. That was why it had awakened at the same time as Yi. Luyi shot Amber a look, but Amber immediately turned away in refusal. He could almost hear it saying, "Don't look at me. I know nothing about consoling girls." Luyi's gaze immediately sharpened into disdain. Amber countered with an innocent expression. Knowing that he couldn't rely on the white tiger's help, he had no choice but to try another method. He started stroking her back gently while humming a happy rhyme. He hoped that it would be enough to chase away the sorrow in her heart. It actually worked. Amber immediately straightened its large ears in concentration. Yi's sobs gradually softened over time until it was completely gone. Still leaning against his chest, she looked up at Luyi and stared at him with reddened, astonished eyes. She was astonished because she never knew that Luyi could sing. Moreover, the tune was unlike anything she had ever heard. When Luyi reached the end of his tune, he sniffed once before asking, "What song is that?" "Don't be afraid." "Really? That's a weird way to name a song." He stared at him doubtfully while wondering if he was lying to her. She then added, "Sing it again, but with lyrics this time." I only know how to hum the tune, I don't care. I want to hear it." He demanded while pursing her lips like she was about to cry again. Fine. And so, Luyi cleared his throat and began singing the song, the lyrics of which he had almost forgotten. As expected, he could not stop going off-key because he hadn't sung in a very, very long time. Amber covered its face after listening to his song for just a moment. Yi was barely holding back her laughter as well. At first, Luyi was too embarrassed to give it his all. Eventually, though, his volume grew louder and louder until he was practically singing on top of his lungs. Yi and Amber were his only audiences anyway. There was nothing to be embarrassed about. When he was done, he sneakily dropped a snowball into Yi's back and let out an evil cackle. This is your punishment for laughing at me. Humanity's Great Sage, Chapter 485, Copper Plate. Snowballs flew everywhere as a cacophony of surprised yelps, tiger roars, and playful cries resounded across the hill. The situation had immediately spiraled out of control after Lu Yi had dropped a snowball into Yi's back. Lu Yi had forgotten most things from his previous life, but thankfully, his snowball fighting skill wasn't one of them. This was especially true since he was a Cloud River Realm cultivator. A bit of spiritual power was all he needed to create a massive snowball. The snowballs flew across the air so frequently that it was like a scene straight out of a battlefield. Of course, this battlefield was far more harmless. As Amber and Yi were literally connected in mind and soul, their teamwork was literally flawless. Amber was responsible for blocking Lu Ye's attack, and Yi was responsible for retaliating. For a time it seemed like the snow fight would end with a stalemate when Amber found an opportunity to pounce on top of Lu Yi and pinned him to the ground. The next second, a snowball the size of a bathtub struck both man and tiger from above and buried them completely. He leaped into the air while cheering, "I won! I won!" The heap of snow trembled unnaturally for a second before Amber's magnificent head popped into view. It then climbed out into the open and shook off the snow clinging to its body. Lu Yi was lying on his back when he walked up to him and grinned at him from above. "This is my win." However, Lu Yi did not respond to her. His entire body except his face was buried in snow. For some reason, he was staring at the falling snow with a thoughtful look on his face. Suddenly, he leaped onto his feet and dropped into a half-crouch. Then, he gripped the inviolable with his right hand and slowly let out a mouthful of hot air. All around him, the falling snow melted before it even made contact with his body. At the same time, his aura sharpened until he felt more like a saber than a man. Both Yi and Amber immediately leaped away from Lu Yi before watching him closely. For a long time Lu Yi did not do anything at all. He simply closed his eyes and maintained his posture. Then, he abruptly unsheathed his saber and swung at the air in front of him. A crescent-like energy immediately flew out of his blade, cutting through space itself, and sank deep into the wall at least 30 meters away from his position. It was only after he unleashed the technique that Lu Yi sucked in a deep breath and slowly returned his saber to his sheath. All the blade insights he had memorized began taking on new meanings in his mind. He had achieved his breakthrough. Who said that hard work and seclusion were the only ways to make a breakthrough? As it turned out, a snow fight could do the same thing. Of course, he could not have achieved a breakthrough if he hadn't already reached his limits or met the necessary requirements, so to speak. All he needed after that was a eureka moment. One that had unfortunately eluded him despite his continuous efforts. That was until he threw himself completely into the snow fight, and suddenly the eureka moment appeared to him on its own. This was why people said that it was important to switch off once in a while even in cultivation. "Lu Yi, we don't have a house anymore," he suddenly said in a sad voice. Lu Yi turned and saw both his and Kitty Shan's house were in ruins. It was because of the snowball fight, of course. In fact, all the houses in the area had been destroyed to a certain extent, causing the hill to look even more decrepit than it was before. "Where will we stay now?" "Nowhere. We're going to find Zhu Jia." The wisp of sanctification of their arcane glade was stolen. Even Kitty Shun had left for greener pastures. There was simply no reason to stay here any longer. It had always been Lu Ye's plan to leave after Amber had completed its ascension. Amber immediately perked up when it heard this. The two were practically inseparable when they were still in the Spirit Creek battlefield. Unfortunately, Amber had not seen the body-tempering cultivator again after he ascended to the Cloud River realm. Mutant energy rolled off Amber as it shrank into the size of a cat before leaping onto Lu Ye's shoulder. After Lu Yi brought out his spirit boat and waited for it to sit down in front of him, they took off into the snow-filled sky. The spirit boat they were currently riding was a middle-grade spirit artifact, and it was much more comfortable than their previous spirit boat. Moreover, it was protected by a spiritual power shield, so even the bad weather could not affect them in the slightest. While blitzing down a certain direction, Yi sang in a cheerful voice the song Lu Yi had sung for her before. On the way, Lu Yi removed Amber from his shoulder and checked its body for changes. There were many. For starters, Amber's fur was softer, smoother and brighter than before. Its aura was also stronger as a champion-class spirit beast. A spirit beast's ascension to champion class was like a Spirit Creek realm cultivator's ascension to the Cloud River realm. Their strength would undergo a qualitative leap. Of course, Luyi would not know exactly how strong Amber had become until it fought a battle. Growl! Amber let out a low growl that Luyi understood instantly. He produced a mutant core from his storage space and fed it to the hungry tiger. Crunching noises entered one ear and exited the other as it chewed. Amber possessed a great appetite in the sense that it could eat spirit pills and even spirit stones. However, there was nothing it liked more than a spirit beast's mutant core. It had become its favorite food since entering the Cloud River battlefield and tasting its first mutant core. Unfortunately, Luyi did not have that many mutant core to feed Amber. He had only obtained a dozen or so mutant cores from the myriad beast's domain. Sunlight began shining down from above. The thick clouds in the sky eventually thinned into nothing. The snow had stopped. Take control, Luyi said while pointing out where they were headed. After that, he took out the raw materials he had purchased from the Divine Trade Association and began forging his ward flags. He had picked up ward flag forging a long time ago, but he wasn't strong enough to forge it completely via his own power until recently. In fact, he had spent some of his time forging ward flags while Amber was asleep. A ward cultivator like him could never have enough ward flags, especially since there were many cases where he had to use them like consumables. When night came, landed the spirit boat on a suitable location so they might catch some rest. While sitting next to a crackling bonfire, Luyi produced a palm-sized copper plate from his storage space and inspected it with his spiritual power. "Is it that plate you got from the guy from the Divine Freedom sect?" asked curiously while moving closer. A few months ago, on his way back to the Arcane Glade, he had encountered a grievously wounded Divine Freedom sect cultivator who requested him to return his sword to the sect. As compensation, he gave up everything he had to Luyi, including this copper plate. Luyi had tried injecting his spiritual power into the copper plate once. He had sensed a certain connection from it. He felt like he might find something if he followed the connection. At the time, Luyi hadn't followed the connection because he was occupied with something else. The reason he was checking it now was because he realized that the direction he was heading happened to coincide with wherever this copper plate was leading him to. "What is this thing?" "I'm not sure." He wouldn't mind indulging in his curiosity if he ran into wherever this copper plate was leading him to before he met up with Zhu Jia. Otherwise, Zhu Jia was still the higher priority. After that, Luyi put away the copper plate and continued forging his ward flags. It wasn't until late midnight that he finally caught some rest. For the next few days, they would resume their journey during the day and rest during the night. Thankfully, they did not encounter any troubles along the way. 3 days later, Luyi flew circles around a certain mountain range while holding the copper plate in hand. Unless he was gravely mistaken, the thing or location the copper plate was leading him to was somewhere in this mountain range. He just needed to find it. Unfortunately, his 10-point map did not mention anything special about this mountain range. It was probably because there were countless mountain ranges in the Cloud River battlefield. Luyi himself did not notice anything special about this place, though he was sure it was hiding something because the copper plate was reacting to it. An entire hour later, Luyi finally confirmed the exact direction the copper plate was pointing him to, and landed in front of a stone wall. As if on cue, the copper plate abruptly shone and grew hotter in his hand. "Luyi! Over here!" called out while waving at him. It was clear that she had noticed something. Luyi walked over to her and saw a recess on the wall. The shape of the recess matched the copper plate in his hand perfectly. Luyi inserted the copper plate into the recess while keeping a hand on his saber. He had no idea what he might find in this place after all. It could be treasure, or it could be a horde of bloodthirsty spirit beasts. In any case, there was no harm in being careful. Thankfully, the insertion of the copper plate did not trigger anything dangerous. The solid wall in front of them simply flashed once before transforming into a screen of light. Luyi hesitated for a second before instructing Yi to return to Amber's body. Only then did he walk toward the light screen. He felt nothing as he passed through the light screen. At the same time, The copper plate flashed golden before enveloping him in a beam of golden light. Behind him, the light screen had transformed back into a solid wall. Even the copper plate Lu Yi had inserted in the wall earlier had suddenly disappeared without a trace. The space behind the wall was pitch black, so Lu Yi raised the inviolable and constructed radiance. The small but blinding sun immediately illuminated everything around him. He saw and felt no one, but his surroundings looked extremely familiar to him. Once upon a time he had lived in a place like this. It was a mining tunnel. The walls glittered like stars as the light of radiance reflected off the surface. Lu Yi stepped closer to inspect the walls. He raised a surprised eyebrow when he realized what it was. Yi had also appeared from Amber's body to cry out, "Oh my heavens! They're all spirit stones. We're rich, Lu Yi." The shiny objects embedded in the walls were none other than spirit stones. This was an orvain. A spirit stone was an indispensable resource to all cultivators. Consuming spirit pills would leave behind pill poison in one's body and affect their ability to inhale world spiritual qi. It was why cultivators usually recovered their spiritual power by holding spirit stones in their hands and absorbing the spiritual power within. Spirit Creek Realm cultivators generally used low-grade spirit stones, and Cloud River Realm cultivators generally used middle-grade spirit stones. The reason Cloud River Realm cultivators did not use low-grade spirit stones was because it wasn't quite enough to sustain their recovery or cultivation anymore. Humanity's Great Sage. Chapter 486, Spirit Stone or Vein. A spirit stone was an indispensable type of cultivation resource. Besides the obvious fact that it could be used for cultivation, it functioned as an excellent currency as well. Given enough spirit stones, there was almost nothing a cultivator could not buy. Of course, spirit stones could not be used in the Vault of Providence. Any transaction conducted in that space had to be done with contribution points. Lu Yi had not expected to find a spirit stone or vein when he followed the copper plate's guidance. Suddenly, he remembered finding nearly 10,000 spirit stones of varying quality when searching the Divine Freedom Sect cultivator's body. He even mused how wealthy the dead man was at the time. With this new revelation, he strongly suspected that his spirit stones had come from this or vein. 10,000 spirit stones was a significant amount of wealth to any Cloud River Realm cultivator. Not to mention that he had other valuables in his storage bag. Lu Yi was currently enveloped in a sheen of golden light, but it wasn't the color of his spiritual power. The copper plate had shone a beam on him after he entered the hidden space, and since then he had been shining like a golden Buddha. Lu Yi had probed it with his senses but could not find what it was used for. It didn't possess any defensive qualities, but it wasn't disruptive either. It just existed for some reason. Lu Yi scanned the spirit stones exposed on the walls. He didn't even need to probe them with his spiritual power to know that they were all middle-grade spirit stones. There were at least hundreds of spirit stones in the wall. He was still admiring the view when suddenly, Amber leaped off his shoulder and manifested its true self. It then growled menacingly at the impenetrable darkness ahead of them. Lu Yi grabbed his saber and gazed into the darkness as well. He couldn't see the threat yet, but he could hear what sounded like rustling noises approaching them at high speed. Yi was already waiting in position underground. The noise grew closer and closer until suddenly, a creature the size of a calf abruptly leaped out of the darkness and attempted to gore him with its singular horn. It had the horn of a deer but the body shape of a rhino. Its body was also covered in thick shells. Amber rushed in between Lu Yi and the strange creature. At first glance it looked like the white tiger was planning to take the enemy head-on. At the last possible moment, it dodged out of the way before landing a swipe on its flank. Unfortunately, it was like trying to attack a hunk of refined steel. Although the attack was strong enough to knock the creature off balance, it did not look like it took any damage at all. Amber seized the opening to bite down on what it perceived as the creature's weak spot. But once again, the shell greatly hindered its efforts. Despite repeated biting, it was flung into the air before it could get through the shell. Lu Yi wasn't idle while Amber was keeping the creature busy, of course. By the time Amber was sent flying, Lu Yi had already unsheathed his saber and wreathed it in fiery spiritual power. An inch of pure energy peeked out the blade before cutting through the creature's head as easy as pie. There was a death cry before the creature hit the ground with a loud thud and spilled aquamarine liquid everywhere. Lu Yi immediately recognized the creature for what it was. An insectoid. Is there anywhere in this world where this species doesn't exist? He had encountered insectoids in the Spirit Creek battlefield, the Cloud River battlefield, and even the Rift of Illusions. He didn't think he would run into them again during a random treasure hunt, and so soon after the previous encounter too. At first, Lu Yi thought that the creature was some sort of spirit beast. It wasn't until he killed it that he confirmed that it was really an insectoid. A Cloud River realm insectoid too. To be specific, it was probably as strong as a first or second order Cloud River realm cultivator, so it was never a problem for Lu Yi. Even Amber could have taken it out all by itself given enough time. However, individual strength had never been the species' forte. It was its ridiculous numbers and reproductive potential. Lu Yi flicked off the blood on his saber before returning it to its sheath. He and Amber then stood in place for a bit. He emerged from the walls and said in a low tone, "The tunnels here are extremely complex and full of spirit stones, but generally speaking, the deeper we go, the spirit stones increase in quantity and quality. However, every tunnel is guarded by a single insectoid, and their strength seems to increase in proportion to the depth of the tunnels." "I see. We must take out the insectoids first before we can mine the spirit stones." Lu Yi nodded in understanding. This was really starting to look like a treasure hunt or a trial with a huge bounty of spirit stones as the reward. As for how it was possible for an unnatural or vein like this to exist, it was because it wasn't natural, of course. The heavens must be behind it all. Lu Yi had just spent most of his spirit stones a while ago. This was the perfect opportunity to replenish his stock. Without further ado, he and Yi began mining the spirit stones in the tunnel. The spirit stones weren't difficult to mine because they were exposed. It took them just an hour or so to mine everything that could be mined. As he had estimated earlier, the tunnel contained between 600 to 700 spirit stones in total. They moved on. They arrived at another tunnel after rounding a corner. This time, Lu Yi illuminated the room by lighting a torch instead of radiance. Lu Yi had a massive stock of torches in his storage space. Barring those with supernatural night vision, practically every cultivator would carry a cache of torches with them. Although cultivators could see in the dark, their night vision was hardly perfect. A torch could alleviate that weakness tremendously. Just like when he entered the first tunnel, a ton of spirit stones reflected the light of the torch and filled the tunnel with light. But unlike the first tunnel, he had just stopped in his tracks when he heard a series of rustling noises once more. Clearly, the insectoid guarding this place had awoken to the light and was making haste to kill the invader. Lu Yi did not meet the insectoid immediately. Instead, he looked sideways and stared at Amber on his shoulder. Since the beginning, Amber had rarely taken part in Lu Ye's battles. Most of the time, it simply lay on Lu Ye's shoulder and spectated the battle from the best seat. If the time was right, it would roar out and stun his enemies. The reason they had an arrangement like this was because most of Lu Ye's battles were beyond Amber's ability to interfere. Over time, the White Tiger learned to stay out of Lu Ye's way unless the situation called for its involvement. Of course, it could also just be a lazy bum. Earlier, Amber had broken character and attacked the insectoid of its own accord. It was probably because it wanted to test its newfound strength after ascending to champion class. Unfortunately, the insectoid turned out to be harder than it thought, both figuratively and literally. It had nearly broken its teeth against its shell. Amber completely lost interest after that. Despite Lu Ye's look, it continued to lie quietly on his shoulder while flicking its tail left and right. Lu Yi could almost hear it saying, "Why are you looking at me?" Knowing that he could not depend on Amber, not that he expected Amber to contribute anything knowing its personality, he faced the end of the tunnel once more and waited. Thankfully, not everyone in his group was a bum. A massive fireball abruptly appeared out of seemingly nowhere and hit the insectoid squarely in the flank, knocking it over. It was so hot that the insectoid looked distorted from where he was. It was certainly screeching like the fireball was literally warping its shell. He wasn't done though. Crescent-shaped wind blades appeared right behind the fireball and slammed against its shell. The resulting impact sounded like a woodpecker pecking away at a tree trunk and caused the insectoid to screech even louder. Lu Yi did not need to lift a finger. Yi would continue to bombard the poor insectoid with all kinds of spells until it was completely dead. By the time she was done with it, he couldn't even recognize what type of insectoid it was anymore. As expected, Yi had become much stronger after Amber's ascension. Her spells were way more powerful compared to before. She had always been an exceptional spell cultivator, but now she definitely qualified as a Cloud River Realm spell cultivator. Not only that, she was capable of unleashing spells of any attribute because she was an apparition, meaning that she was not restricted to a physical body's natural affinity. After the insectoid was dead, Lu Yi and Yi proceeded to mine the spirit stones in the tunnel as before. They were still middle-grade spirit stones, but their quantity had increased a little. In total, they had mined over 800 spirit stones. They moved on. Suddenly, Lu Yi noticed something concerning. The golden light enveloping his body was slowly but surely fading over time. They had only conquered 2 tunnels, but the golden light was already visibly diminished. At this rate, it would disappear in a couple of hours at most. He wasn't sure if this was a good or bad thing. Even now, he still had no idea what the golden light was for because as far as he could tell, it neither empowered nor hindered him in any way. He would probably have to wait until it was completely gone to finally figure out its function. The third tunnel was the exact same as the second tunnel in the sense that it was filled with spirit stones and guarded by exactly 1 insectoid. It was looking more and more that the mine was designed this way by the heavens, and any cultivator who wished to mine the spirit stones would have to overcome the trial by defeating the insectoids first. The insectoid Lu Yi killed was comparable to a first or second order Cloud River Realm cultivator. The one Yi had killed was a little stronger. The insectoid's strength would continue to increase with each successive kill. 6 hours later, Lu Yi entered the 8th tunnel. By now, he had collected nearly 10,000 spirit stones. This time, the insectoid that charged him was a praying mantis. It was almost as strong as a 5th-order Cloud River Realm cultivator. The insectoid proved to be a difficult opponent as its twin blades were as swift as lightning. Lu Yi felt as if he was fighting against a true blade master. Alone, he would have had a harder than usual time to defeat it, especially because its shell was incredibly tough. Thankfully, he wasn't fighting alone. He forced the insectoid to split its concentration by blasting it with spells again and again. Amber didn't join the battle, but the life energy art in Beast Pact art allowed it to strengthen Lu Yi without even lifting a claw. An ice spell hit the insectoid and coated its surface in ice, slowing its speed and reaction for an instant. Lu Yi immediately seized the opportunity to fire a few crescent-shaped energy blades into its neck, and forced it to bend backward, exposing its soft belly. Without hesitation, he launched himself forward with both feet and stabbed the inviolable completely into its stomach. One explosion later, the praying mantis' internal organs were turned into mush, and it collapsed on the ground with a death screech. Humanity's Great Sage, Chapter 487. Like hammer you are. Starting from the 8th tunnel, a small percentage of the spirit stones Lu Yi excavated were high-grade spirit stones, less than 10% to be exact. However, 1 high-grade spirit stone was worth 10 middle-grade spirit stones in the market, so it was very valuable even in small numbers. They entered a new tunnel. 2 hours later, Lu Yi swallowed a healing pill and pulled out a clean bandage from his storage space. He then wrapped it around a bone-deep wound on his arm. It had taken him 2 whole hours to win this battle. His vitality hadn't even fully subsided yet. Lying dead not far away from him was the corpse of a fat insectoid. Strength-wise, the insectoid was almost at the level of a 7th-order Cloud River Realm cultivator. Despite Yi's help, Lu Yi still had to give it his all to finally slay the enemy. He was unable to avoid taking some injuries either. Lu Yi would have lost no matter what, had he been facing a true 7th-order cultivator. Lu Yi was powerful enough to slay enemies who were 2 or 3 minor realms above him, true, but he was hardly omnipotent. There was only so much he could do to bridge the chasm that was sheer power. Luckily, most insectoids only had 1 or 2 ways to kill the enemy. He took a short rest before he started mining the spirit stones in the tunnel with Yi. They were still in the middle of mining when suddenly, the golden light enveloping his body extinguished entirely. Lu Yi immediately stopped what he was doing and expanded his perception. He had been curious about the golden light since the beginning, but he had not been able to find out its function. Something should happen now that it is gone, right? He was just thinking this when he felt a wave of invisible energy pushing at him from all sides. The next thing he knew, he was standing in front of a wall once more, the cave entrance. Lu Yi was speechless for a moment. Yi looked flabbergasted as well. She was trying to pry a high-grade spirit stone loose when she suddenly found herself standing in the open once more. I see, Lu Yi exclaimed in realization. The golden light was some sort of temporary identity pass that allowed him to stay within the tunnels. No wonder it faded over time. Once his time was up, he would automatically be returned to the outside world. Damn it, we weren't done mining the spirit stones. He clearly thought the same thing as him because she abruptly dove head first into the wall. While waiting, Lu Yi checked out the recess on the wall. The copper plate that was supposed to reside in it was gone. He did not think it would be possible to re-enter the Orvane without the copper plate. As expected, Yi returned a while later and shook her head. There's nothing behind the wall. Nothing at all. At first she thought that the Orvane was just behind the wall. Since she was an apparition, she could just pass through the walls and return to the tunnels. She did not need the copper plate at all. She quickly discovered she was wrong, however. The only thing she found behind the wall was solid rock and earth. It was as if the Orvane never existed in the first place. Lu Yi explained, the copper plate we used to open the entrance probably has some sort of teleportation effect. The tunnels we entered and the Orvane itself are elsewhere. It was a shame they didn't manage to collect all the spirit stones before they were expelled, but they still obtained over 10,000 middle-grade spirit stones and a couple hundred high-grade spirit stones. He should not run out of spirit stones for the foreseeable future. A quick rest later, the group resumed their journey once more. On the way, Lu Yi activated his battlefield imprint and asked Zhu Jia his current location. The body-tempering cultivator quickly responded, but his answer caused Lu Yi to furrow his eyebrows. It was because he noticed that Zhu Jia was, for whatever reason, moving further and further away from him. This made no sense before he had specifically told Zhu Jia beforehand to buy a 10-point map and use it as a reference. If Zhu Jia really was traveling in his direction, it was impossible for them to stray further and further away from each other. He thought for a moment before asking, "Are you traveling according to the annotations on the 10-point map?" Zhu Jia replied, "Yes. Like a hammer you are." At this point, Lu Yi was 100% certain that Zhu Jia was misreading the 10-point map. Zhu Jia wasn't stupid, but he was a little simple. It was possible that he wasn't able to understand the 10-point map. Not only that, Lu Yi had a strong suspicion that Zhu Jia was a little road blind. There was no way he would still be on the road otherwise. Just stay where you are. I'll come to you. At this rate, they were never going to meet up with each other. He might as well tell Zhu Jia to stay put and wait for him. On a certain spirit peak of the Cloud River battlefield, a brawny man was holding up a 10-point map and looking it over. A while later, he scratched his head with a look of utter incomprehension on his face. After wrapping up his exchange with Zhu Jia, Lu Yi tried messaging his fourth senior brother, Li Baxian, next. Previously, he had not been able to contact him, probably because he wasn't in the Cloud River battlefield. He could have been exploring a hidden realm at the time. His message went out successfully this time. It wasn't long before he received a response from his fourth senior brother. "You're in the Cloud River battlefield, junior brother?" His fourth senior brother asked in a pleasantly surprised tone. He clearly wasn't expecting Lu Yi to ascend to the Cloud River realm so quickly. "Yeah, I've been here for a while," Lu Yi replied. Good, good. Li Baxian praised him. "I'm a little busy at the moment, so please focus on your own adventure for the moment. I'll come to you when I'm finished with my business." "Do you need my help?" Lu Yi offered. "It's fine. I can handle this myself." "Very well. Take care, senior brother." Li Baxian had carefully omitted all the details from his response, but Lu Yi still noticed that his fourth senior brother was probably in some sort of difficult predicament. Otherwise, he would have sought him out no matter what. At a hidden location in the Cloud River battlefield, Li Baxian ended the message while grinning from ear to ear. "They grow up so fast these days. You look happy. What is it?" A gentle voice rang beside him. It was none other than his companion, Fengyue-chan. Li Baxian declared in a proud voice, "My junior brother has come to the Cloud River battlefield." Fengyue-chan looked surprised. Already? She didn't bother asking who. There was only one person in the entire Jiuzhou whom Li Baxian addressed as junior brother, and that was Lu Yi. His cultivation speed is impressive, but of course. He's my junior brother. You didn't ask him to join us, did you? We're not exactly in the best of situations right now. Of course not. I told him we'll go look for him once we're done with our business. I see. Suddenly, a grimace crossed Li Baxian's expression before he grabbed Fengyue-chan's shoulder. They're here. Let's go. They immediately leaped on their swords and shot into the sky. Not a moment too soon, a dozen cultivators appeared from the horizon and gave chase. The leader of the group shouted angrily, "Surrender it now, Li Baxian." The sword cultivator merely laughed loudly. You want it? Come take it. Earlier, while Fengyue-chan and Li Baxian were exploring a hidden realm, they had stolen its biggest reward from right under a bunch of 8th and 9th order cultivators' noses. Since then, the group had been hunting them down like bloodhounds. Lu Ye's prediction was spot on. If Li Baxian wasn't in a tight spot, he would have met up with Lu Yi as soon as possible. After wrapping up his exchange with Li Baxian, Lu Yi continued to travel toward Jujia's location. Suddenly, he sensed something and looked behind him. He immediately saw a cultivator heading toward him at high speed. Judging from their speed and aura, they had to be a 7th order cultivator or higher. Lu Yi immediately concentrated on the person until he had a clear view of their appearance. The incoming cultivator was a young man in his 20s. His hands were folded behind his back, and he wore a small but confident smile on his face. His attire marked him as a combat cultivator, but Lu Yi did not dare trust in his assumption until he saw something concrete. After all, most cultivators would make an attempt to disguise their true cultivation faction. Generally speaking, it was difficult to determine one's cultivation faction based on their appearance alone. Peng Dehai was the best example of that. Lu Yi had always believed that the fat man was a spell cultivator, and he was. However, he was also a superbly durable body-tempering cultivator. Anyone who thought they could defeat him just because they had tactics that were specifically meant to counter a spell cultivator were going to have a bad time. Anyone who underestimated a cultivator's cunning was going to have a bad time in general. In Lu Ye's case, it didn't matter what the mysterious man's cultivation faction was. At his current strength, there was simply no way he could go up against a 7th or even 8th order cultivator. That was why he empowered his spirit boat with Windwalk and sped off after observing the cultivator for a bit. At the same time, he abruptly steered his spirit boat in a different direction. Unfortunately, the young man behind him changed directions as well. He's chasing us, Lu Yi. At this point, even Yi noticed that something was wrong. I know, Lu Yi replied grimly. Under any other circumstances, there was no way the young man would pursue them so doggedly. He was certain that he didn't know the young man, and the young man didn't know him. If the guy was just hoping to ask for directions or something, he would have gotten the hint and stopped chasing them by now. Unfortunately, he hadn't. It could only mean that the young man bore him ill will. It was quite common for a low-level cultivator to be robbed on the Cloud River battlefield. It was why most of them avoided flying carelessly in the open or found safety in numbers. Otherwise, it was almost always going to end badly for the weaker cultivator. If they belonged to the same faction, then the robber might still let them go. But if they were enemies, then the weaker cultivator was going to lose not just their possessions but also their lives. Wait, fellow cultivator. The young man chasing after them shouted. You misunderstand my intentions. I mean no harm. Lu Yi did not bother to answer. The young man had homed in on them like an eagle chasing after a rat. Only a complete idiot would believe that he meant well. I'm going to get angry if you keep this up, fellow cultivator. The young man hollered again. Lu Yi ignored him again. Unfortunately, he was unable to shake off the young man despite having empowered his spirit boat with Windwalk. Not only that, the distance between them was shortening bit by bit. They were 4, maybe even 5 minor realms apart. Naturally, the difference between their flight speed was night and day as well. If Lu Yi didn't have Windwalk, he would have been caught a long time ago. Meanwhile, the young man was incredibly surprised that Lu Yi managed to elude his grasp for so long. From his perspective, Lu Yi was just a third-order cultivator while he was a seventh-order cultivator. Normally, it should be impossible for Lu Yi to escape him for this long. Greed flashed across the young man's eyes. From his perspective, the only way Lu Yi was able to stay ahead of him was the spirit boat. It had to be an exceptional flying spirit artifact. The reason Lu Yi rarely used Soar was precisely because it used far more spiritual power than a flying spirit artifact, not to mention that he had buffed himself with Windwalk. At this rate, he was going to run out of energy in just a couple of hours. A couple of hours was enough though. For hours later, the young man realized his error. It was one that filled him with incredulity, anger and regret. It was because a city had appeared from the horizon, and it wasn't long before Lu Yi entered the city and vanished from view. There were many cities in the Cloud River battlefield, but unlike the Spirit Creek battlefield, no mortals lived in these cities. In fact, there were next to no mortals in the entire Cloud River battlefield. Generally speaking, the only ones who frequented the Cloud River battlefield were, of course, JoJo Cloud River Realm cultivators. Most of the cities in the Cloud River battlefield were founded by the Divine Trade Association, so they did not have a unique name of their own. Instead, they were addressed as City of Heaven XXX. For example, the City of Heaven's Lu Yi just entered was designated as City of Heaven's W16. The W in W16 meaning west. The city was built huge as it was meant to serve Cloud River Realm cultivators. Otherwise, the collateral damage alone would have driven the Divine Trade Association into insanity. Each and every building was at least tens or even hundreds of meters away from each other. From the sky, they looked like ghost stones on a board. At the center of the city was a massive building owned by the Divine Trade Association. There were two types of cultivators in the Cloud River battlefield. The first type were those who owned an arcane glade. These cultivators rarely left the confines of their arcane glade unless absolutely necessary. They would schedule their departure ahead of time, plan shifts if one or more members had to leave within the same time frame, and generally ensure that the arcane glade was properly protected all the time. Humanity's Great Sage, Chapter 489 Face Mask. A short while later, a trade manager walked into the private room Lu Yi was seated in and saluted him respectfully. He said, "What would you like to buy, honored customer?" Lu Yi replied, "I would like to buy a spirit artifact that can disguise my appearance." In fact, he had been thinking about making such a purchase since he was a Spirit Creek realm cultivator. Back in the Spirit Creek battlefield, everyone in the Thousand Demon Ridge had a picture of his face. As a result, there was literally nowhere he could go where he wouldn't be recognized and attacked. The reason he hadn't bought such a spirit artifact back then was because of Amber. There was practically no one in the Spirit Creek battlefield who didn't know that the Vanquisher of Sex owned a white tiger. Why buy the spirit artifact when one look at Amber was all his enemies needed to identify him? That was no longer the case since he obtained a spirit beast bag from the Myriad Beasts domain. Now that he had the option to hide Amber in the spirit beast bag, he could actually disguise himself with a spirit artifact and stay anonymous. No one would ever realize he was Lu Yi of the Crimson Blood Sect unless he revealed himself. Moreover, no one except Lan Zi had recognized him yet, because the Spirit Creek battlefield and the Cloud River battlefield were two completely different worlds. The champion of the Spirit Creek battlefield might not necessarily be able to reign supreme after ascending to the Cloud River battlefield. This was a battlefield full of geniuses and elites. No one would purposely hunt down a newly ascended Cloud River realm cultivator when there were better prey out there. That said, Lu Yi had a feeling that the Thousand Demon Ridge hadn't forgotten about him. As he grew stronger, he would catch significantly more attention as well. It was better to prepare now than to regret his lack of preparation later. A spirit artifact that can disguise your appearance? The manager looked troubled. That is not an easy request to fulfill, honored customer. Are you out of stock or something? That's not it. Generally speaking, A spirit artifact that can disguise one's appearance or even their aura isn't sold in the Divine Trade Association. In fact, spirit artifacts with unique properties are usually purchasable in the Vault of Providence only. Yes, that means you can only buy it using contribution points. In your case, a lot of contribution points. Luyi wasn't aware of this. He asked, how expensive are we talking here? 10,000 contribution points at the minimum? That was seriously expensive. It wasn't like Luyi did not have the contribution points to spare, but 10,000 was an investment even he had to consider seriously, not to mention that he was just preparing for the future. It wasn't like he needed it right here and now. Besides that, I must warn you that spirit artifacts like these are generally quite fragile. It is entirely possible for them to be damaged in battle. The manager paused for a moment to observe Luyi before continuing. On the other hand, if you're only looking to disguise your face, might I suggest buying a set of face masks? Not only do we have face masks of all shapes and sizes, they're sold at a fairly cheap price. Your storage bag won't hurt even if you lose all of them. Face masks, you say? Would you like me to bring them to you, honored customer? Please. Very well. Please give me a moment, the manager said before leaving to procure the items. A while later, he returned with what looked like a cosmetic box and pressed down on 2 side buttons. A click later, the box opened to reveal a bright mirror at the upper compartment and a thick stack of exquisitely crafted face masks at the lower compartment. Luyi counted 8 face masks in the cosmetic box in total. The topmost mask featured the snarling, fang-bared face of a green ghost. The second mask featured a white fox with a pointed mouth and slanted eyes. The rest of the face masks were different not just in appearance but in art style as well. You may try them out if you want, honored customer. The masks only need a tiny amount of spiritual power to maintain, and are as light as a feather. Unlike a spirit artifact that actually disguises your whole appearance, you probably wouldn't even notice the drain unless you wear it for an extended amount of time, the manager recommended enthusiastically. Luyi inspected the goods for a bit before picking up the white fox face mask. He then carefully put it on his face. At first, he thought he would need to adjust the face mask, but it automatically clung to his skin upon contact. There was a cool sensation until it disappeared a few seconds later. If not for the fact that the face mask had to be maintained with a trickle of spiritual power, he wouldn't even notice that he was wearing it. His eyesight was completely unobstructed, and when he looked down at the mirror at the upper compartment, he saw a white fox with a pointed mouth and slanted eyes looking back at himself. The thick purple eyeshadows beneath his, or rather, the face mask's eyes gave him a ghastly appearance. Luyi found the item quite interesting. It didn't take a genius to see that the crafter was extremely attentive. Each pattern and line had been crafted with the utmost care. More importantly, the face masks came in a set of 8. He could switch them if one of them had worn out its welcome purse. Luyi removed the white fox face mask before putting on a different mask. This time the mirror reflected a sultry woman's face with unblemished skin and soft, red lips. Beside him, he could hear barely suppressed laughter leaking out of Amber's body. Luyi expressionlessly returned the face mask into the cosmetic box before giving it a light slap. How much does it cost? The manager immediately perked up. It's only 320 middle-grade spirit stones. A bargain in my opinion. It was. If he divided the price by 8, it meant that each mask cost only 40 middle-grade spirit stones. He could not help but recall the first few times he entered the Divine Trade Association. At the time, he had haggled with the manager like a housewife in the market. Today, his days of poverty were long behind him. It was why he did not hesitate to pay the manager on the spot. After he stored the cosmetic box safely in his storage space, Luyi added, "I would like a room, please." He did not know if the young man who tried to rob him earlier was still around. He might even be spying on him right now. That was why he decided to stay the night in the Divine Trade Association. He did not think that the young man would risk it though. Luyi knew he didn't have many friends he could count on in the Cloud River battlefield, but the young man didn't know that. For all he knew, Luyi could message his friends and get them to kick his ass to Kingdom Come. The reward just wasn't worth the risk. Soon Luyi found himself resting inside a guest room on the 3rd floor. It should not need to be said, but the living conditions of the guest room were far more comfortable than the wilderness or an arcane glade. He resumed his cultivation only after he had ordered a tableful of food and enjoyed a satisfying meal with Amber. He set up the circle of boon and placed a couple of high-grade spirit stones at key locations of the ward. This would increase the room's concentration of world spiritual qi drastically. He also placed a dragon scale in the middle of the circle of boon, so that he and Amber could absorb its blood qi. Lu Yi had obtained a total of 5 dragon scales during his visit to the dragon spring. There was far more blood qi in the dragon scales as well. Lu Yi had given Amber 1 dragon scale so it could consume its blood qi at its own time. He kept one for Ju Jia as well. The body-tempering cultivator was, well, a body-tempering cultivator, so the blood qi in the dragon scale would be greatly beneficial to him. Lu Yi was reading when suddenly, a message entered his battlefield imprint. He wondered who it was when he saw that it was Xia Qianqian. To say he was surprised would be an understatement. Why would a 9th-order cultivator like her seek out a 3rd-order cultivator like him? Yes. Are you at City of Heaven's W16 right now? Xia Qianqian asked directly. Lu Yi almost blurted, "How did you know?" before he controlled himself. He hadn't seen her since they left the myriad beast's domain and parted ways, and this was the first time they contacted each other. It should be impossible for her to find out his whereabouts. He even suspected that she had planted some sort of tracking art on him. Thankfully, he figured out the answer on his own. Did Zhou Hai tell you where I was? He had encountered Zhou Hai by accident when he was entering the Divine Trade Association. The sword cultivator was the only one who knew his whereabouts, meaning that Xia Qianqian had contacted Zhou Hai earlier. That's right. Are you still there? Yeah. Wait for me. I'm coming to see you right now. That was the end of the conversation. Lu Yi frowned as he tried to think why Xia Qianqian might need him. He never came up with an answer. Just 2 hours later, Lu Yi received another message from her. A quick exchange later, he told her his room number and heard her knocking on his door a few minutes later. He opened the door and nope, it wasn't a prank. It really was Xia Qianqian standing in front of his room. Brash as usual, the woman welcomed herself into the room before he could even say anything. She looked around, took a deep breath, and shot him a meaningful look. I didn't disturb you, did I? What? Lu Yi did not understand what she was implying at all. It's nothing, Xia Qianqian replied sweetly. She had heard that the Divine Trade Association offered certain services that were quite popular among male cultivators. Anyway, why are you here? The woman turned serious and said, I'm here to request your assistance. Her answer only confused Lu Yi even more. I'm just a 3rd-order cultivator. How could I possibly help you? It is precisely you're just a 3rd-order cultivator that you're a perfect fit for the job. I wouldn't be asking for your help if you were higher than 5th order. Well, tell me. A while later, Lu Yi finally understood why Xia Qianqian had sought him out. To put it simply, she wanted his help to kick some ass. Some time ago, her sect mates had stumbled upon a newborn arcane glade. Unfortunately, a different group had discovered the arcane glade at the same time. The arcane glade was just a small and low-quality arcane glade that could fit 5 people at most, so sharing was out of the question from the get-go. Not only that, it so happened that their sects were hostile toward each other, so they did not hesitate to beat the crap out of each other. The problem was that they were evenly matched. They were unable to decide a victor even until the end of the battle, which complicated things considerably. A long negotiation later, it was agreed that each group would invite 5 helpers each and have them fight another battle. It would be the battle that would truly decide the ownership of the arcane glade. However, both groups were fairly weak in terms of cultivation, so it was agreed that the helpers they recruited must not exceed 5th order Cloud River realm. Xia Qianqian's sect mates had messaged her and asked for her help. If she had enough time, she might not have sought out Lu Yi. Unfortunately, there was a time limit. Lu Yi was wealthy enough that he couldn't be tempted by most treasures, and he wasn't someone who succumbed easily to social pressure, not to mention that this favor might draw some unwanted heat to him. Unfortunately, it would seem that Xia Qianqian knew exactly what he desired. I think this item suits you perfectly. What do you think? Xia Qianqian grinned ear to ear when she noticed Lu Ye's expression. You are sure this is a lucky draw? Xia Qianqian nodded. No one knows what is inside the box until they open it. Where did you get this? There's a hidden realm that opens once a month nearby. I got this a couple days ago. Lu Yi nodded and took the amulet casket from Xia Qianqian. It so happened that he was quite confident in his luck these days. Does this mean we agree then? If this amulet casket gives me a blue amulet or better, then yes. A blue amulet was worth over 1,800 contribution points. Not only that, amulets in general weren't purchasable via contribution points. If he could get a blue amulet or better, then this detour would be worth it. How do I use this? Lu Yi asked. After listening to Xia Qianqian's instructions, Lu Yi tapped a spot on the amulet casket. The box began opening outward like a blooming flower. At the same time, its rainbow glow began spinning and flowing into the box. When the box was fully opened, a purple light shone from the depths of the box. It was none other than a purple amulet. Xia Qianqian's eyes immediately widened like saucers. She already knew that Lu Yi was ridiculously lucky, but she still hadn't expected him to open a purple amulet from the amulet casket. She had opened at least 80 amulet caskets since entering the Cloud River battlefield, if not 100. To date, she had only opened 2 purple amulets from them. Most of them were white, some of them were green, and only a handful of them were blue. As for Lu Yi hiding his main weapon, Xia Qianqian knew exactly what the man was plotting. She had no qualms with it though. His deception would only improve her sect mate's chances. Suddenly, a cultivator flew up to them from below. Xia Qianqian assuaged Lu Yi before he could react. He's one of us. The cultivator met up with them soon enough. Judging from his tall stature and muscular body, he was clearly a body-tempering cultivator, a 5th-order body-tempering cultivator to be exact. Lu Yi reckoned that he was the other helper Xia Qianqian had recruited before him. The body-tempering cultivator saluted Xia Qianqian respectfully. Senior Sister Xia. And the woman returned the gesture with a slight nod. The body-tempering cultivator glanced at Lu Yi next but didn't salute him or even offer him a greeting. It was because he was wearing a fox mask in broad daylight like a criminal who had something to hide. Moreover, his aura revealed him to be a 3rd-order cultivator. Naturally, he wasn't deserving of his attention. As the trio resumed their journey, Xia Qianqian sent a message to her sect mates. 4 hours later, the trio landed on a spirit peak and was welcomed by 3 cultivators. They were 2 men and a woman. They had to be the sect mates Xia Qianqian had mentioned. Judging from their aura and attire, they were a combat cultivator, a ghost cultivator, and a spell cultivator. Senior Sister. The trio saluted. It was clear from their disheveled appearance and various injuries that they had experienced a battle some time ago. However, they were also cultivators. As long as their injuries weren't too severe, they should be able to fight at almost max capacity. Lu Yi was unable to identify their cultivation level, but they could not be stronger than the 5th order. Not including Xia Qianqian, they were exactly a group of 5. Once again, they went on their merry way. An hour later, they landed in a valley where 6 people were waiting for them. The leader of the opposing group was a young man with a dignified appearance. He complained immediately after seeing Xia Qianqian. You're a little late, fellow cultivator Xia. Like hell I am. There's still some time before the deadline. Xia Qianqian retorted immediately. Judging from the terse air between them, they weren't just acquaintances who were standing up for their group. They were enemies as well. After checking her surroundings and confirming that the opposing group hadn't prepared an ambush or trap for them, she asked, So? What's the format? Is it going to be last man standing or battle royale? The ghost of a smirk tugged at the young man's lips. You seem very confident, fellow cultivator Xia. We'll know after the battle is over. Now cut the bullcrap and give us the details already. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.